Hey everybody from the Peterson, my name is Bryant Kreaden. I'm known as the Car Shrink, and today we're going to take a look at some of the cool stuff in the Caretakers Collection. So the Caretakers Collection is made up of particular cars that the owner had dreams of when he was growing up. Particular cars he had posters, and mostly that was 80s, 90s, that was what he grew up with. But then along the way, he would take a journey and look at other cars that would maybe have him go on particular drives or experiences. As he went down the road of collecting one by one, we pick one car. Let's say he was in love with an F40. That was the car he lusted after. But then after a while, he learns a little bit more about different history of Ferrari. And then there's the Bizzarini story, which is kind of a genesis story of Ferrari. So that leads him to buying a Bizzarini. And then then he basically starts getting involved in 50 sports racers. Starts looking at RSK Porsches and then 910 Porsches. And that way he can take different road trips with his friends, his buddies, who are all into that kind of thing. And then there's more experiences that he has. So as a child of the 80s, I was nuts for cars. My whole life has been about cars. I would pick cars for my dad, my uncles, and that's how the Car Shrink was born. I would pick cars for my clients later on, but first I started with friends and family. My Uncle Marvin would call me and say, hey, I need a new car. The Jaguar E-Type burned down, so let's go get another car. And then that rolled into, as I was a kid, I went down to the Lamborghini dealership and I saw my first Countach and I lost my mind. And from that moment forward, I knew I was going to work with cars and work with people finding the cars of their dreams. Now I pick cars and maintain collections, and we procure, buy, sell. I look for what the trends are, what's going to be next. And it happens to be right now, the trend is very heavily towards 80s and 90s and early 2000s, which happens to be my specialty. First car we're going to take a look at is a 1932 Chevy done by Zion, who gave it as a gift to the Caretakers Collection. He's a close personal friend. This vehicle took about 10 years to build. It is supercharged. Check out that huge blower. It has 1,400 horsepower maximum. With a screwdriver, you can turn it down to 900 horsepower. And it is an absolute blast to drive. I've never driven it because I'm scared of it. This particular one, as we were discussing, has a blower, supercharged, handmade. This was 10 years of love. It is absolute terrifying to drive. Notice the size of the huge back wheels and the wheelie bar. And it will do wheelies and shoot flames. So the great part of working with collections is you also get to work with some great builders. We just so happen to have Vince, the builder of this car. Come on, Vince, show us. Let's start talking about the car.
How you doing?
So this is Vince.
How are you?
He spent, am I right, 10 years of your life building
Pretty
this?
close, about 10 years.
10 years. So tell us the main things. Let's talk about the chassis. Let's talk about the motor and also the special things that you've done to make this a truly one-of-a-kind.
Overstarted frame. It's a original 1932 Roadster frame. From VIN numbers through the DMV was a 32 Roadster. With a steel body, broad bod steel body for the car.
Right.
Then we go to a small block Chevy, stock bore, stock stroke. Buzz is about 9,500, just to compete with the Ferraris and Lamborghinis and everything.
So what size did it start as?
Starts at 350.
A 350,
yeah.
Just a regular 350 block.
Well, 4-bolt mains, forged steel crank.
Okay. How many horsepower? So I've said I was told it's 1,400 horsepower or 900 horsepower with a screwdriver. But how does that really work out? Is fuel and all these things and barometric pressure and all this stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
It all depends on the boost.
Okay.
Where you do the pulleys on it. The larger the pulley is on the top, the lower the horsepower.
Okay.
If you notice, dragsters will have real small little pulleys on them. Dragsters, funny cars, real little pulley on the top, big pulley in the bottom.
Right.
That gets overdriven, so you're spinning the blower faster than the engine.
So this has a supercharger
Yes.
and a blower.
No, a supercharger
is the blower.
Yeah.
There we go, see?
The GMC Roots blower.
Right.
Very traditional hot rod type blower. It's not the turbo
Right.
or the all the different types they have. Whipples and they've got now. This was one of the old traditional Roots blower out of the 70s.
Piece by piece. Everything from the crank, pistons, all that stuff
absolutely.
was built by you.
Yeah, it was all bored. It was bored, just a cleanup bore, and I'm running 8.75 pistons, compression. You get more horsepower with low compression, high boost than high compression, low boost.
I'm gonna ask a simple question.
Speak.
What is left from the original car on this car?
The frame.
The frame. How fast? How fast will it do the quarter mile, give or take? I'm not gonna hold you to it. Give or take. 10-second quarter mile? 8-second quarter mile? 10? What do you think?
Ooh,
give or take.
Between 10 and 11s, I'd say.
Okay.
Try to stay straight is the hard part. There's no traction control or nothing.
So when you start a build like this, you start with the frame.
Correct.
Then you start building the motor, right?
Yeah, you start building the motor and you start working on all your suspension and what you're going to want. This started off as just being a regular parts car.
Right.
I didn't want anything exotic, nothing outrageous. Then people come over and they go, oh man, you got to have a killer motor, you got to do this, it's got to be real bitchin'. And one thing leads to another with the exhaust pipes. The exhaust pipes are all stainless. Okay, the interior's all common together, and it's got a special speedometer, which you already saw.
Oh, we didn't see that. We got to show that.
Now see the windshield?
Yes.
See the little, this is a laminate windshield.
Right.
So it's not
not an original windshield.
Well,
they didn't have that in the 30s.
I don't know if they did it. Well, I wanted to get some safety minded. So like you get a rock, it won't shatter the windshield. But see a little tint on the top of the windshield and the wind wings?
Right.
So that's all handmade. That's all handmade. The glass shop flipped out. They go, well, we'll have to get a windshield, have an RTD bus. That's the only that's that big. That's got that. That had to have the tint.
Got to have the tint.
It just made it a little different. There's some little aspects that make it like the wind wings.
A couple last quick questions. So it took you 10 years.
Approximately. But you start and you work on it and you put it off to the side and think, oh heck, this is, and you do something else. You get a new girlfriend, you hang out with her, and then you finally get bored. You go back to the car, and it goes back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't straight 10 years. I take off like 6 months, a couple months maybe.
So you do some work, you shake it down, do some work, shake it down.
And everything, nothing's the first shot.
Right. And body work you said.
Oh yeah, body work. Right. Body work and interior.
Who did that?
The body work was done by Pauly Auto Body in Hollywood.
Okay, I know Pauly.
And Adam Fleiner took over the Pauly Auto Body. He has his new place. And Thomas Upholstery did all the interior.
Okay.
But I dropped it on and said, here, I want the interior done. And I know Dale very well.
So this is,
whatever.
I'm gonna stop you. So this is a California car. Basically built here, lived here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a true California hot rod.
Yeah, just good old hot rod.
Just like you.
Just a good old hot rod.
Okay, so we're taking a look at something that's really in my wheelhouse, near and dear to me. This is Ferrari's answer to the hypercar game. This is the LaFerrari Aperta, which was the best of the best. So top Ferrari clients got this. They made approximately 200 of these. And the amazing thing about these cars, first of all, they're almost 1,000 horsepower, 950. The top came up, they have different doors. It's a hybrid, so it has an electric battery propulsion along with obviously gas. Unlike some of the other hybrids, this one does not have an all-electric mode. It's basically the motor is always running pretty much. The top comes off, the doors open differently. These things are insane to drive, super fast, and they're just a heart attack to look at. If you notice, the nose is super sharp. The styling itself is almost like a Formula One car. That was kind of the design speak. And actually, this was one of the first of the supercars that Ferrari was making wasn't done by Pininfarina. This was in-house design, and you can see the design speak was very angular and very sharp, and kind of looks and takes its feel from a modern Formula One car. It does have an electric lift, so when you go in and out of garages, you have space. The speed that these cars can run on tracks is pretty much almost equivalent of some of the race cars from the 70s and 80s. Even with a carbon fiber tub, still the car is able to extract unbelievable performance and certainly scare your passenger if you want. So we are taking a look at the 2003 Ferrari Enzo. The car is obviously named for the namesake of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari, obviously paying tribute to him. This car changed the game for Ferrari. Mid-mountain V12, full carbon fiber tub. It was groundbreaking at the time. One thing particularly interesting about this one, and colors are a thing, most of these are red. This one being black is very rare. I believe there's only 2 in black with Koyo worldwide. They are 660 horsepower, normally aspirated. Car has a sequential gearbox with a single clutch. Absolute riot to drive. They scream, and they're light because they don't have the batteries. And right now, a lot of collectors are really into normally aspirated cars. So this particular Ferrari Enzo in black with Koyo, they made 8 total black cars. This particular one, there's only 2 in this color combination. This one just caught his eye and he fell in love. So we're taking a look at the MC12. This particular car is really near and dear to myself and also the Caretakers Collection. It is basically an offshoot of the Enzo. They share a lot. A lot of the DNA of the car is similar, the same engine, same gearbox. However, the styling on the Maserati is longer and stretched out and has some really amazing cues, like particularly over here, you can see it has these intakes, but they had, just like in the Testarossa, they had to make these centerpieces so that a baby's head or child can't get caught in there. One thing I really love, and we love, about the MC12, the top comes off, which really sets it apart from the Enzo. Also interesting factoid, the Maserati had a little bit less horsepower than the Enzo, and that's because, in Italy you cannot have a faster car than a Ferrari, of course. But one interesting factoid about it is, since this car is a little longer, it was actually able to have a higher top speed. Interesting factoid, all MC12s were done in this color combination except one. One was made black, and that was actually for Michael Schumacher. And the fun part of that is that car was actually at the Peterson and lives pretty close by to us. We're taking a look at the 2022 MC20, which just came out. It is a V6 twin turbo. The car has a dual clutch transmission, absolute blast to drive. It's a full carbon fiber tub, and this car was added to the collection to go with the MC12. If you notice, the color combination is the same, similar color, the white with the blue. And if you can see, you can actually see some of the DNA from the other car too, a long nose, kind of stretched out tail. Really a blast to drive, really fun, very active, amazing on canyon roads. We are looking at one of the most iconic poster cars of the 80s and 90s. Pretty much, you had this, you had a Countach. The F40 was originally designed to be part of the Group B racing, which got canceled, but they still went ahead and made the car. This was the last Ferrari that Enzo Ferrari had his hand in designing. Twin turbo V8, and at the time it was the first car to officially break 200 miles an hour. So it's a really special car, and pretty much it is icon of icon, and no modern supercar collection is complete without an F40. And as Ferris Bueller said, if you have the means, I highly suggest it. This particular one is a US spec, which they're rarer, and it is just an amazing car to drive. All carbon fiber, twin turbocharged V8, and you better be in a straight line when you kick on the turbos, unless you know what you're doing, because it's going to put you on a real ride. I don't like that at all. So a couple things that makes the F40 iconic. First of all, pop-up headlights. Any classic supercar needs that. But also let's talk about the driving experience. It's pure. There's no radio, roll down windows. The door handles are a wire. And when you drive this car, it's just pure driving experience. All you listen to is that twin turbo V8. So we're taking a look at the 1991 Jaguar XKR-15. This particular car was the first all carbon fiber car. So that meant the chassis was carbon fiber and the body. This particular car, not this actual one, but all of them, were the offshoot of the XKR-9, which won Le Mans. And the father of that was a guy named Tom Walkinshaw, who was almost like essentially the Roger Penske of British racing. Sports cars, Le Mans. He came up with he had a team that was involved with Jaguar, which became Jaguar Sport, and that's how they won Le Mans. And basically, they were coming out with the XJ220, and the rumor is that he wasn't so happy with the design, and he basically made his own car. There's 50 of these in the world, and they are just unbelievable to drive. They are a right-hand drive, but a right center, and the shift is on the right-hand side. And this car basically is the genesis of the McLaren F1. The same designer designed this, and him and Gordon Murray came up with the McLaren F1. So it was the genesis of the ultimate supercar. These particular cars, when you take a look at them, especially in the interior, they look like a race car. They drive like a race car. And this is probably the purest race car for the streets in the collection. It is an absolute terror to drive. The Jaguar XKR-15 has a normally aspirated V12. It's an absolute beast. It revs like a chainsaw, and it's like being Wile E. Coyote driving this thing. So we are looking at one of the pride and joys in the Caretaker Collection. This is a 959, 1987. The great thing about it, we can go into the history, of course, that it was built for Group E racing. They ran the race version of it, the Paris-Dakar. And when you talk about all these amazing statistics, one thing that people don't really talk about is how comfortable it is to drive, how usable, how enjoyable. And this car, the owner of the Caretakers Collection, can drive daily. The air conditioning works. You know, the seats are comfortable. And most supercars are not that, especially cars from the 80s. Amazing performance, of course. It was designed to go 200 miles an hour. Of course, I think it just missed it by that much. And when you compare the 959 to the F40, it kind of talks about the difference of the DNA of the two companies. Porsches are more comfortable, more usable, while the F40 is a little bit more wild, more ragged. And that's what makes the 959 super special. Super drivable, super fun, but usable. Very rare, only 337 of them. And couple things that they did: had an adjustable suspension, twin turbo, 6-cylinder. A lot of the stuff that was in this car was the test bed for what would be in Porsches for 20 years later. It was just way ahead of its time. And mostly, look how cool it is. I mean, was a spaceship then, and it is still a spaceship today. So we are looking at a 2005 Carrera GT, black, US specification. There are about 1,300 worldwide. What sets the Carrera GT apart, aside from its amazing looks, it is, I think, in my personal opinion, it is the pinnacle of analog cars, and pretty much not my opinion, everybody's opinion. What's really important about the Carrera GT, the V10 motor. That car was made for Porsche to go in Formula One, and it screams like a car at a Formula One race, and that's really what sets the Carrera GT. Of course, its performance is amazing, and the handling is amazing, and it is just a pure car to drive. When it was being built and tested, even the test drivers were saying, this thing is a beast. But also, on the other hand, they're very drivable. Air conditioning works, comfortable, they start every time. People have a little bit of things to say about the clutch, but once you get used to the clutch, it's very easy. The short little let out of the clutch, the car will just drive itself. An amazing piece, fun to drive, fast, and it definitely makes a statement everywhere it goes. And let's not forget, the top comes off. 1968 Bizzarini 5300 Stradale, which means road. They made another version, which was a race. And what's really interesting about the Bizzarini, we'll get into the story, he was Ferrari's chief designer. And many people feel that this car is the third Ferrari GT, or third version, or Series 3. It was Italian design with American muscle, but a lot of the design on this car was years ahead of its time. It was the first car to have slab sides. Also, if you when you sit in this car, your feet are a little bit up, almost like a modern race car. Really interesting factoid about him also is, essentially Bizzarini had the car driven to Le Mans, the race version of it. It won, which Bruce Meyer has the winning car, of course, and then it drove home. They are absolute fun to drive, super powerful, make an amazing noise. This particular one was fully restored back to its original color, and it is just spectacular to look at, and everywhere you go, people lose their minds. Bizzarini 5300, there's less than 150 made. Unfortunately, there are more fakes than there are real ones. So you have to be very careful when you're sourcing these cars. This particular one has some really interesting options because it's a very late car, the second to last one made. Factory air conditioning, factory electric windows, which is really cool and makes it a little bit more comfortable to drive. So we're looking at a 63 Cobra. This particular one is a very early car with a 260. That's before they started putting the 289. V8, lightweight car, American power, British bodies essentially. They are absolute blast to drive. Great V8 sound, super easy to drive, tossable, great on the open road. The owner of the Caretakers just loves taking this car out, and just the styling itself, and it's one of these cars that people look at and everybody smiles. As many people at the Peterson know, the Cobra was born of Carroll Shelby going to England, taking the bodies and sticking big American motors in them, basically a hot rod with a British body. This particular one with a 260, early car, super fast, super tossable, and that's what made them great race cars. They, the ultimate stick a big motor in a little car, and just very easy to drive, very drivable, very controllable, especially with a smaller motor. Unlike the 427s, which can be a little bit more of a handful, the small block cars are more controllable and easier on mountain roads, a little bit more forgiving. '55 Porsche Carrera Speedster, one of 15. Extremely rare, and actually the first Porsche to wear the Carrera badge. Super lightweight, 4-cam motors versus the regular motor, which had 55 horsepower. This had 90 horsepower, which nowadays doesn't sound like much, but back then it was a big deal. Cars are extremely lightweight. If you notice, the wheels are different, very rare, restored, beautiful to drive, and just an absolute classic. So this particular car, 1963 Myers-Manx, one owner, not restored. That's original paint. We redid the interior on the car. Near and dear to our heart, obviously a California institution. No collection in California especially is complete without a Myers-Manx. The interesting thing about Myers-Manx, born out of Newport Beach, California. They were assembled. Most of them have Volkswagen motors, as does this one. And just fun, yellow, the right color. We are looking at a 1954 Corvette. This actually was the first car added to the Caretakers Collection. It was bought out of a local newspaper in Louisiana, and this car was a victim of Hurricane Katrina. It has a Blue Flame straight 6, and it was restored and brought back to life. It is polo white, obviously has a straight 6, and this one will definitely be with us forever because it's the first car he ever bought. This is a 1998 355 Spider. This particular car I sold new to its original owner, then to its second owner, and then to the Caretakers Collection. What the 355 did for Ferrari was changed everything. It was the brainchild of Luca di Montalemo, who was the president of Ferrari, and it was an answer to Honda or the Acura NSX. The only Ferrari aside from the F50 that has a 5-valve motor, and that's what makes them sound insane. Power steering, air conditioning that worked, and handling that was off the charts. Absolute blast to drive. Timeless design, small proportions, Pininfarina classic design, even still fast by today's standard. We are looking at a 1957 Ford Thunderbird, absolute classic Art Deco styling, the porthole windows on the hardtop, absolute classic, but this car was particularly bought for the caretaker's mother. She always loved this car. This was her poster car, her dream car. And from what I understand, she drives it sometimes when she comes to California, but this car is never leaving the Caretakers Collection because it's his mom's poster car. We are looking at a 1948 Cadillac convertible. This particular car was the second car added to the Caretakers Collection, done in particular colors that he loves, the blue with tan. It's the ultimate car to go for ice cream in. I love, and who doesn't love, a 4-seater convertible. And actually, I think you could sit one in the front also, so you can get more people in. Lots of chrome, big, imposing Cadillac, comfortable, quiet, when Cadillacs were king of the road. Absolute boat on wheels, and it's a blast. So we're looking at one of my favorite cars in the collection. This is a Porsche 910 1967. This particular car won the Hockenheim race. Fiberglass, super lightweight. There's two versions of the car. There's an 8-cylinder and a 6-cylinder. This particular one has the 6. The car is really original body, and that's a piece of art. It is, the flowing lines is just such a classic car that a lot of people don't even know it's a Porsche. And we also know that Bruce has one. So, you know, Bruce has one, we gotta get one. We are looking at a 1931 Phantom II. Now this particular car has a lot of nostalgia for the owner of the Caretakers. He had an Uncle Joe who really was the one who got him interested in cars, and he had the sister car to this. And so when he found this car, in hopes of buying this car, he wanted to one day maybe trade the other person or even buy the other one. Couple interesting features of this particular car. First of all, it has the crystal set. So in the 30s, people were making cocktails in the back. So if you're a gangster, and obviously this is the ultimate Al Capone gangster car, you're gonna make a couple cocktails. Also, your driver's separate. The roof comes off at the back. You had a little radio so you can bark your orders at the driver. Speed up, slow down, follow that car. So, a lot of cool stuff about this car. I mean, check out the brass grille and the huge lights. It's an amazing piece of history. So we were looking at a really special motorcycle, 1923 Indian with the Princess sidecar. The story of this motorcycle is really interesting. The owner of the Caretakers Collection bought it, was planning to restore it. Then he took out the seat cushion and he saw a little signature in there and found out that this was an actual motorcycle that was owned by Steve McQueen and was restored by the Von Dutch. So he left it alone, didn't do anything, and this is how it sits right now. And it obviously stays in the family as well. (1930) Majestic. It's a French motorcycle, very rare, particularly interesting design. They only made 100 motorcycles. There were only 10 with sidecars, only 2 surviving. 2 of them happened to be in the collection. Just an unbelievable piece of machinery. I mean, the styling alone, the sidecar, he obviously has a thing for sidecars, but this particular sidecar, just the styling and the teardrop shape. The other one in the collection is blue with crema, and it's just a spectacular motorcycle. From what I understand, they're not that much fun to drive, but who cares when they look like this? We are looking at a 1959 Porsche RSK Spider, one of 34 made. These are the giant killers, and this particular one is super special. First of all, it doesn't have the greatest race history. It was a privateer car, but the interesting part of not having a great race history means it wasn't smashed. So it's all original. It has the original body, original chassis, original motor. That is super rare with RSKs. These cars were the evolution from the 550 Spider, made famous by James Dean. They have a Carrera 4-cam motor. They would race against the Maseratis and Ferraris. Amazing race histories, and a lot of these won many races. The Porsche RSK is just obviously, I think, one of the greatest cars ever made. And when people get into the newer stuff, they eventually end up going back into the old stuff. And the RSK is one car that any heavy Porsche collector should have. Thank you to Peterson for coming to check out the collection. If you want to see more of this, check out @Caretakers Collection on Instagram. And if you want to see more about the Car Shrink, go to @TheCarShrink and check out all our stuff. See you next time.